Welcome along then to another big match build-up show, and this episode is once again sponsored by OneFootball. Do make sure you check out the excellent free OneFootball app to keep up to date and notified of all the latest transfers, scores and stats all in one place. To download the OneFootball app, click the link below the show. So 2 games for Saints this week amongst the transfer window, and Crystal Palace on Wednesday night. And winter is well and truly here, just in time for our favourite annual Freeze Fest at Burnley this Saturday. So on this week's double episode, confidence is contagious as we head north. And stay tuned for a coach's technical perspective on Nathan Redmond's influence and why he's so important to Saints right now. And as for the opposition, Burnley are on the bounce too, going through a Claret patch of their own, and I speak to the No Name Never podcast.
I'm confident now. I really am confident in the boys. I think that the way that he's got them playing, the way that he's got them working, you know, if this fixture would have been under the previous manager, I'll be honest with you, I'd be fearing the worst. But there's no reason why we can't go out there, get a positive result or a positive performance, and maybe even all 3 points.
We won 3 games back-to-back against relegation rivals, and we were absolutely robbed at the 4th straight win away at Watford, who are in 7th and absolutely flying. So we should have come away from that actually above you in the league with 4 wins on the bounce. So, you know, expect Burnley to be equally as confident and perhaps be able to give you a game.
So do stay tuned later on in the show for your bite-sized away guide for Burnley. And as usual now, the episode is available to download in the card above my head if you're watching on YouTube, or available on most audio platforms below the show. So enough of that then, time to kick off our big match Burnley build-up as Saints head to Turf Moor. So welcome along then to our first half of our big match Burnley preview show. 2 games this week, but joining me once again, really happy to introduce once again back on the show. We haven't seen him for a long time, but working closely, working hard as well alongside Matt Tissier himself at the MLTNC, and Jody Rivers. Really good to speak to you. How are you been? It's been a long time since we spoke. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it has been, Fred. Been obviously coaching down at the academy, which has been fantastic to see the boys and the girls develop. So yeah, pretty much more of the same, really, Fred.
And how was your trip to Bilbao as well? I mean, it's hard to even sort of think about the hot climates of that sort of weather when we've got a freeze coming over the UK at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was very, very fortunate enough that was set up by Matt himself. He went to Bilbao. He was given the Loyalty Award because obviously where Bilbao only produce their own, and you have to be Basque to play for them. And I don't know if people know that are watching the show, but only Real Madrid, Barcelona, Athletic Bilbao, the only teams never to be relegated from La Liga. So when you think about producing their own and just from the Basque land and the Basque country, it's quite incredible. So they reward loyalty, and who better to reward than our main man himself. So he obviously had the contacts over there, and I was very fortunate enough to go out and spend some time. I've seen the first team right the way through to the academy. So it was very much a warmer climate when I was there 3 months ago, Fred, for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll leave a link in the card so people can go back and watch that video from a couple of months ago over on your YouTube channel as well. So go over and check that out for the incite for Athletic Bilbao's academy as well. But back to home matters though, Jody. Double game week this week, and Crystal Palace quick in the memory, or I suppose in our case, we're recording this just before kick-off. We've got to predict the outcome. Our best missed it Meg impression. So we've got to assume there's either 3 points that moves us away from the drop zone. We go to 14th above Palace, but we said it off screen just a second ago. Let's not use C words around here. Let's not use the word comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I think if we manage to get 6 points from the next 2 games, then I think comfortable will be the word. I think that will pretty much ease relegation fears. Since I last spoke to you, I was very frustrated, and I know some of the other fans were, with the style of football that we were playing under the old manager. It was very much the same. There didn't seem to be much idea. There didn't seem to be much discipline or even heart and desire from some of the players. But the new man has come in. And I've got to be honest with you, I didn't take to him as quickly as some of the others did. The first couple of games, I sort of looked at some of his tactics and substitutions. But in a way, Freddie's trying to get used to the squad. I was a little bit disappointed with the Man City team as well that we put out. I'm a believer, there's no free hit. When these pundits sort of say it's a free hit Saturday, because you've got Manchester City, for example, I don't believe in that. A game is an opportunity to get 3 points. So I'd have liked to have seen us attack them a little bit more. However, since then, he's been a revelation. I like the way he talks. I like the way he's got the players disciplined. He seems to have got the more senior players on board as well for me, which was crucial. I think that the other managers didn't seem to have that. So the fact that he seems to be getting the better out than the more senior ones gives the youngsters, when they come in, a better opportunity to be blooded in. Because what you don't want to be doing, Fred, is bringing these youngsters in under pressure with senior players, maybe not happy or not giving 100%. I don't think any professional ever not gives 100% on purpose, but I think that when you've got things on your mind and you're not happy, but these senior pros have really stepped up, and it's helped the youngsters.
Yeah, and what it is, the intensity has been, magnified, I suppose, and everybody's really buying into his philosophy, whether you're a senior player or a younger player, and we'll get to transfers in just a moment as well. But, I suppose whatever the outcome on Wednesday night, and we still maintain and we're still truly upbeat. Hasenhüttl has got a much better record than Hughes had in his entire time already, in the quarter of the time that he's already had. And despite only sitting sort of a point better off at this stage last season, we're really positive for things to come.
I think what you've read in the press as well, when you hear him speak, what I like about him is that he talks about discipline. So I know that he's the first in at the training ground. He's pretty much the last to leave. I'm not saying, I don't know, I must make it clear that I'm not, even though I'm fortunate enough to go to Staplewood occasionally, I'm not there on a weekly basis or a daily basis to really sort of give any insight into that. But what I do get the gist of is that I think that Hasenhüttl, rather than talk about the old managers, he sets the example, the way he acts, the way he talks, the way he's disciplined around the club, the way, he's sort of, like I said before, galvanised those senior players. So we're very much optimistic. And it was like when Pochettino came in, he was relatively unknown. But I think this one, when it happened, has excited a few people. What he done at Leipzig is really good. But yeah, I mean, he's hit the ground running in a sense that he's given a little bit of faith back, and the Southampton way seems to be back, and I think that's the most important thing.
That's exactly right, and the pathway, I suppose, has been reopened, and perhaps you could even sort of draw examples on your approach to the football coach. Always, developing these youngster players from 7 years old all the way through to 16s, on to professional football as well. And we've seen a lot of senior players now depart for whatever reason, for attitude, for footballing reasons, and the managers put faith in the youngsters, and we all love it. But what would you specifically put that sort of success down to?
Well, I think that when the Southampton way was promoted by the club, when you look back at even under Nigel Adkins, but particularly when we got back to the Premier League, we talked about, Nigel Adkins, when Pochettino gave a lot of faith to the young players, and he does it at Tottenham as well. Maybe if he was at a different model at Tottenham, he would have more success there. But what he done at Southampton was great, and it seemed to stop a little bit under Ronald Koeman. I think that Koeman, one of the reasons he went was because he wanted to buy a little bit of success by buying players, but it doesn't always work. And for a philosophy to really work, I've always said, whether it be coaching, whether it be playing or any business, you need to produce your own. And I think these young players have not been given an opportunity, but even when they have been given an opportunity, too much expectation's been put on them. They've been playing in a team, like I said, with senior pros that maybe weren't playing, like I've said, 100%. But now I just seem to think that the Southampton way's back. I mean, his first selection to put, Jan Valery in and Kane Ramsey into the squad. We've seen Tyreek Johnson, Callum Slattery, Sam Gallagher's got a sniff again. Obafemi's played. All of a sudden, if you'd have said to us 3 months ago, we're gonna get rid of Cedric, we're going to get rid of Davis, we're going to get rid of Gabbiadini, we're going to get rid of Hoot, and we're going to replace them with players coming through people would assume we're doomed. But I think that what's good, with praise for the senior players, these young players, their enthusiasm has brought something to it. It's when you're coaching a session. I always say that coaching the older ones is sometimes quite harder because they're at an age now where they don't want to talk or they're a little bit embarrassed to ask a question. Whereas if you have the little ones come in when they're 6, 7, 8 years old, they're bubbling, they're full of enthusiasm, they don't care whether it's raining, and I know it's a little bit different with the first team, but I think that what's happened in a different aspect is these youngsters have come back in to the fold, and I think they've actually gave that little bit of enthusiasm and running and trying to impress the new manager. And I think the senior pros have responded to it.
And what it is as well, we're also in that season now, of course, January window. By the time we kick off on Saturday, the window will be closed. It closed on Thursday after the Crystal Palace game. And this week also reports suggesting that Charlie Austin could be on his way out. He may already be leaving by the time we kick off. But, reports suggest that we're in for this Birmingham striker, Che Adams, likened to Troy Deeney, but Hasan Hüttl said for a couple of weeks ago that whoever we sign, he must be a long-term fit. And, we're battling also this weekend's opponents for Che Adams' signature. And
Che Adams looks a very good player. And I think we do need a different option up there. I think that Charlie, first and foremost, for £4 million, if we were to sell him now, the fact that we bought him for £4 million, he's been good business. He's been unlucky with injuries. I don't think that he's ever really got going in the Saints shirt. Just when it looked like he was going to score us lots of goals, unfortunately for him, injuries or lack of form from other players, so we've had to change the system, for example, hasn't helped. But Charlie, if he has gone by the time this goes out, goes with his head held high. I think he's a fantastic character around the training ground. He's obviously well liked by the players, the staff, and obviously the fans. So, but sometimes, Fred, these things come to an end, and it's right for both parties. I'd like to see Charlie go and score goals for another team, and he'd be welcome. Obviously, it goes without saying, he'd be welcome back by the club at any time. But I think we do need a different presence up there. I think that with Gabbiadini gone, and Charlie potentially going, there is obviously space for another one. And I think that with the emergence of Redmond, who I'm sure we'll come on to in a moment, as a striker, I think that, someone up there to take a little bit of physicality off the quicker players, if you like, would be good.
And Nathan Redmond, we're saying this now, it's almost unprecedented sort of last season, but this season really he's in the form of his life, scoring every other game, being a true influence. And last season we were berating him, but there was certainly a lot of people giving a little stick, and Nathan Redmond is probably the first name on the team sheet.
Oh, without a doubt. And I've got to put my hands up now, Fred, and say he's proved me. Well, no, he hasn't proved me wrong. I always thought there was a player there. I always did, because, the recruitment that the club do, some of it hasn't worked out. But we knew what we were getting with Redmond, and, a player that's quick and with pace. But when the ball went to him under the previous managers, Fred, his first thought was fear. Now, with that, he would take a touch, and his first thought was to look to play to a midfielder, set to Bertrand, and almost didn't want to take a player on. It was only this season, and Hughes does deserve credit for this. Hasan Hüttl came in, I think, and taken Redmond to another level, and I think he will take him onto a level even further. But Hughes and his coaching staff do deserve credit, because this start of the season, when Redmond got the ball as a winger, the first thing you want him to do is take a positive first touch and attack, whether that be attack the space in behind a fullback, and rather than run into midfield and then lay it off, he now looks to dribble himself and go. Emergence as a striker, I think, has been fantastic. You can't play him as a one, as a centre forward, as an old-fashioned number 9. But if you're playing with 2 up front, he's perfect to play up there and play on the shoulder of the last defender. But honestly, Fred, he's gone from being a player that frustrated the life out of me to now, without a doubt, there's no question about it for me, he is the first name on the team sheet. He is a constant threat. Like I said, he looks to be playing with confidence. He looks to want to take players on. And I'm going to make a bold statement now. I I've got 3 statements now that I hope will come to fruition. When Pochettino came to the club, within a few months, I said that he would manage Manchester United or Real Madrid. When Virgil van Dijk came to the club and he was playing under Koeman, I said that he would go on to be the best defender in the world. And I think that those 2 are realistic. I'm going to make another one. I think Nathan Redmond will go to the Euros with England in 2020. But the reason being, Fred, Hughes deserves credit, but I think him and his coaching staff, whether it was Mark Bowen or whoever was there, they took Redmond aside. They had one-to-ones with him. But Hasenhüttl was a coach. He's not just a manager, he's a coach. And you can tell that he's his stride patterns between the ball when he's dribbling, his body shape when he receives it. I've noticed now that he receives with the inside of his foot when he takes the ball away from people. So it means he's got more control of his body and the ball. Little coaching points, mate. And I just think that under Hasenhüttl, under the current coaching staff, I do believe that Redmond will flourish. And I'll ask you a question, and people will laugh at this, but it's my opinion. I watched Chris Sutton on a show the other night. You know, he was saying that Van Dijk's the 3rd best player in the world, and people were laughing. We're all entitled to our opinions, but you tell me, is Raheem Sterling much better than Nathan Redmond? Raheem Sterling's had the best coach in the world with him. Now, if Hasenhüttl can coach on the similar line to that, I'm not saying Hasenhüttl is Pep, but if he can get that coaching, if they can improve him technically, I don't see the massive difference in the 2, Fred.
All right, well, there you go. We'll put it down in the comments below. Then let us know if you've made it this far as well. Let us know if Redmond is in fact better than Raheem Sterling as well. But Redmond is, he gives us excitement on Saturdays now or yes. Wednesdays, perhaps against Crystal Palace. But interesting you say that about Nathan Redmond. Actually, I think from a coach's point of view, that not a lot of other people would point that out, that his techniques, the way that he receives the ball and takes the player on. Back to the weekend though, it's an annual freeze fest. Obviously, there's a cold front, snow coming across the UK as well, and it's about that time of the year that we do play Burnley, and it's set to be about 0 degrees once again. It was the first game of the season, 0-0, and last season you could say a very important point in the scheme of things, but we're on an upward trajectory now. Some might say Burnley are 2 winning 3 out of the last 4.
Exactly, and I think, if I'm honest with you, it's a tough game to predict, let's be honest, without stating the obvious. This one could go either way, and I think that this is a real test of Saints' character. If we were going to Old Trafford, or if we were going to Anfield, like I said, I don't believe it's a free hit. That's not my opinion in football, but I think that people wouldn't expect us to get anything. We'd have, probably wouldn't have the majority of the ball, whereas against Burnley, we are expected to go up there and be positive and try and win the game. I think that going there at this time, the way Burnley are playing under a fantastic manager, let's not, forget, Fred, that they've struggled a little bit. They've, no club's got the right just to win games of football, let alone Burnley, just because they got into Europe, last year. So it's a tough place to go. It will be like the elements. It's the old-fashioned, rather than Stoke on a Tuesday night, can we do it at Burnley on a Saturday
in February?
In February. But it's a real test of the lad's character. But I'm confident now. I really am confident in the boys. I think that the way that he's got them playing, the way that he's got them working, if this fixture would have been under the previous manager, I'll be honest with you, I'd be fearing the worst. But there's no reason why we can't go up there, get a positive result, or a positive performance, and maybe even all 3 points. Yeah,
so Burnley will be a difficult time. They're on a bit of form too at the moment, but we look unrecognisable since the first game. We're full of confidence, but is it too early to say this is a 6-pointer this weekend? A win would certainly ease some relegation woes.
So I do think this is a 6-pointer. I think if we can come away from Burnley with 3 points, a 6-pointer for those that maybe the younger viewers might not know. If we beat Burnley, we get 3 points. They can't get 3, and it's as simple as that. So it takes us away from them. I think that the way we're playing, if we can pick two or three wins up and a couple of points over the next 6-7 games, I think that's us safe. And therefore we can build for next season. We can blood more youngsters. We can not just blood the youngsters, but get the systems right and start to find out a bit more about the players, but not getting ahead of ourselves. Burnley is going to be a tough game. I'm a big fan, as I've already said, of Sean Dyche. I'm a big fan of Burnley. I think that they'll get through this season. I think they'll stay up, and I think that you'll see us competing with them in the mid-table, hoping to get into Europe possibly next season. I've got the faith back. I think that the way, like I say, the way we're playing, but also the way the club seems to be run again. You know, I'm going to be very biased, but bringing Matt Tissier as an ambassador to boost everything, you know. But it does though, mate, doesn't it? Well, when you've got these young players there, we've seen it at our academy. You know, when Matt comes in, he makes a difference, Fred. He's got such a presence. You know, if you're stood training one day and, I don't know, maybe everyone at work goes a little bit flat from time to time. And all of a sudden you look over and you're a young player or you're a pro and Matt Tissier stood there. Do you know what I mean? And you've already got Calvin as part of the squad, you know, as part of the first team staff as well. I just think that the club have made some, you know, behind the scenes, I think they've had a lot of stick, you know, with some appointments and probably rightly so. And they'll put their hands up. But I think, you know, over certainly the last couple of months, they've done a lot of positive and they've noticed that our club, you know, what we are again. And all of a sudden I feel a little bit of excitement going back to St Mary's rather than thinking, oh, here we go again.
Well, the positivity seems to be contagious at the moment, but the weekends, you know, we said this on our previous show build up to Palace. It was almost sort of unthinkable to think about 9 points over the next 3 games. Let's assume, hopefully, we've got 3 points against Crystal Palace, 3 against Burnley, 3 against Cardiff. That's us rightly comfortable away from the drop zone. But this weekend, prediction and sign us off where we can find you as well so people can keep up to date with you. A
prediction this week, I'm going to go, I think that we've still got a little bit of defending to do. So I do think we'll concede. I think that Arsene Hurtle, you know, is working on that, particularly defending from the front. So I do think that we are, you know, likely to concede, but I can see us winning 2-1. I'm not going to say the scorers, but, you know, I'll go for a 2-1 win, lots of positivity. And you can check us out on, obviously, the Facebook page, Twitter page, Matt Tissier Natural Coaching.
Excellent stuff. Really good to speak to you again, Joe. And hopefully everybody's enjoyed your details and your insight to some of the coaching techniques as well. But really good to speak to you, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Cool. Cheers, mate. Thanks, Fred.
Huge thanks again then to Jody for joining us this week. Hopefully you've taken something different from our conversation this time round on how Redmond is such an influential figure for Saints. But really interesting to find out a coach's perspective. And if you want to keep up to date with Jody, find him on Twitter, or if you're under 16, and you can find him at one of the local Matt Tissier natural coaching sessions. So do get involved where you can. Anyway, if you are heading to Burnley this weekend, here is your bite-size away guide. Firstly, if you're driving up and back on the day, it's an early one, it's a cold one, and do be careful on the roads. If you're on the trains, be aware there are Northern rail strikes after 5 p.m. on Saturday, and will be particularly busy on reduced services going out of Burnley and perhaps even further afield from Manchester down south. And if you're after a match day pint, the most important thing for me anyway, and almost every recommendation that I've scoured the internet for, it suggests you head to the cricket club just next door to the football ground. Pies and pints are cheap, or if you're after some fine ales, and I hear the Bridge Beer House in the city centre is recommended and listed in Camera's Good Beer Guide. Only a 10-minute walk from the ground from there too. So there are some options, but enough of that then. Time now to speak to our opposition. And because we recorded this just before Burnley took a point at Old Trafford on Tuesday, it might be a little bit off in places, but nonetheless, it is a game neither team wants to lose. So welcome along then to our second half of our Burnley big match build-up show, and we've got a familiar face once again. We spoke to her right at the beginning of the season. Seems like such a long time ago, but time flies in the Premier League. Natalie from the No Nay Never podcast. Really good to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to see you too.
Well, I mean, I suppose this season It's been a stark contrast from last, I suppose. You know, last season, the highest ever finished 7th in the Premier League for Burnley. I mean, now you could say, back to regularities down at the bottom. What do you put it down to this season, I suppose?
This is a natural season for us. I flipped that on its head and say last season was the anomaly, not this one. The reality of life for clubs outside of the top six, and certainly for clubs like Burnley, Huddersfield, Fulham, clubs like that, is that you'll be in a relegation battle last year. And the fantastic season we had last year doesn't change that. And Dyche was very clear about that coming into this season, that just because we finished the 7th last season doesn't just suddenly turn us into a different bracket of Premier League club. And the reality is that for the foreseeable future, until either investment opportunities change or the money cascading down the Premier League changes, we will have this every single season.
I suppose you could say that the cliche is that you might have been hindered by your Europa League cameos, but it's taken you a while to get going this season, really. I mean, this month of January over Christmas as well, you've hit a little bit of a claret patch, if you like. Winning a few games, creating a cushion from the bottom three as well, and that's giving you a bit of confidence to push on for the final half of the season.
Yeah, definitely, and I love that claret patch. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind. I'm going to use it. Yeah, absolutely, and I think I knew this was going to happen as soon as it started, and it just happened over and over again. And then, if I'm brutally honest, I'm a little bit bored of answering the same question by a lot of people every single week of saying, oh, Europa League really scuppered you. And I don't see how it could have done, really, because Dyche didn't use the first team to start those games. He played the reserve side. So there's no excuse then for the poor performances of the first team in the league. I think, yes, of course, I'm not naive enough to suggest that it didn't impact in a small way, but I don't think it was the sole reaction. I question whether there was any complacency in the side and whether or not there was a feeling of, oh, well, actually, it's quite easy to survive in the Premier League now. We've done it twice and now it should finish 7th. And maybe the same fear at the beginning and the same edge at the beginning of season. They maybe got themselves in a situation where they felt that they could ease themselves in gently, whereas we know you can't do that. You've got to set off with all guns blazing. I do also question whether or not there's been any break in the tight unit in the dressing room that there maybe was last season. This is purely my speculation, and it's not anything official or anything that's come out of the club. But if you look at the achievements that this squad made last season, you've got players in our side like Ben Mee, Sam Vokes, those Ashley Barnes, players who, as much as I adore them, aren't getting snapped up by a top six side. They worked so hard last season and were rewarded with not Champions League, that would have been cool, with Europa League football, and didn't get to play any of the games. Now, you're not telling me that didn't have an impact on the intensity and the drive and maybe perhaps a relationship with the manager. That added with the perceived Joe Hart complication of him coming in as well. And I just think we were out of sorts. Now, the problem we've got is that will cripple you if that goes on as long as it did for us. I'm still not convinced we're out of it yet. We are only 3 points clear, and as much as it's looking a lot brighter than it did, I'm still not convinced that we will survive. I just hope that we'll learn our lesson from that early season grumbles, and that we've not given ourselves too much of a hill to climb.
Well, I suppose football's full of cliches, and perhaps, we could get on to the FA Cup later on as well. But, perhaps the second half of the season, you could be boosted by a signing or two. And, Sean Dyche has actually been in the press the last couple of days and said it's been really difficult to even think about sort of bringing somebody. I mean, where would you say you need to strengthen? You've got a really tight squad.
First and foremost, we ain't signing anybody. The main thing for me is that we started this season with our stock as highest as it possibly could be. Sean Dyche was the miracle manager that was touted for top six jobs and possibly even the England job one day. Burnley had finished best of the rest. We had a Europa League campaign and we still couldn't attract anybody to come. And that doesn't help by the fact that we go out into the market and offer 50p and about 10p a week in wages. We are really poor in the transfer market. Now, I'm hoping that that's been strengthened by the appointment of a new I think it's an operational director who's come in and he's going to oversee transfers. I think for me, Sean Dyche was too close to the transfer structure, and he had too much of a say on who came in and who didn't. To me, I think your manager identifies your targets and then just leaves it to the board. So if we're not going to sign anybody in the beginning of this season, relegation, who's going to come to us in January when we're out of the Europa League and we're now battling a relegation battle. That said, I think this team is probably looking stronger than it has done for us. And with the emergence of our young winger Dwight McNeil, suddenly the urgency, I think, for a wide man has gone. We've now got 4 players who can play wide, and you can only play 2 of them in any one game. And assuming we can get all 4 of them fit at any one time, I think maybe the urgency for that position has gone. So for me, the main position that we need is a striker. We've got 4 fantastic strikers, but they are all championship strikers. And that's no disrespect to them. Ashley Barnes is God in my eyes. I absolutely adore him. Fans know what I feel about Sam Vokes. I love these players, but we don't have any Premier League strikers at our club. So perhaps January isn't the time to go and buy a striker. But if we can maybe look to one of the top 6 or 8 clubs and see if they've got a decent striker that can come out to us on loan, that to me would be a perfect signing.
I suppose what it is, you can also put down your upturn in form. You're being boosted by the return of your captain, your number 1, Tom Heaton, and you mentioned Joe Hart, this sort of, I suppose, a charade in his, I suppose, transfer earlier on in the season. But there's no surprise that you've upturned some form, and Tom Heaton made some terrific saves and actually earning you some points over the last sort of 4 or 5 fixtures.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think we've got to be very clear here. 2 things to be very clear. Tom Heaton isn't our number 1 keeper. Nick Pope definitely is. So I think we were all waiting for Nick Pope to get fit, which we believe is only a couple of weeks away. And, Tom Heaton may very well lose that number 1 jersey to Nick Pope again, because he was incredible for us last season. Joe Hart's a funny one in that if you look at his technical ability on the pitch, he probably didn't do that much wrong. He also made some fantastic saves, and in the early games at the beginning of the season, he was stopping us getting beat 5-6-0 and only getting beat 1 or 2-0. So he, on the pitch, he probably didn't do anything wrong. What has become really clear is that Joe Hart just is not a man's man, and he does not have the support of the team, and he certainly doesn't have the support of his back 4, which is absolutely fundamental when you're a side like Burnley that's set up to defend, and that's what we're famous for, of being very stingy, keeping people out and trying to nick one on the break. It's little things like, Joe Hart could make an amazing save and none of the back 4 would go and give him a high five or a fist pump or say well done. It was just, they just didn't even acknowledge that he'd made an amazing save. And similarly, if Ben Mee put his head on the line and took a ball or something like that, Joe Hart wouldn't reciprocate and say like, oh, well done. The very first game that Tom Heaton comes back in, he makes a clearance straight away, and all of the back 4 are on him. He's clearly massively popular, and he has that relationship. So if it didn't do anything technically, but all it's done is just bring that strength back together, the back 4, then it was obviously needed.
Well, I suppose you could say Joe Hart's reputation precedes in the sort of the way that he left Man City. He wasn't favoured at all. But I suppose if we, before we get to the weekend, you do play Manchester United on Tuesday night. It's won 8 straight games and through in the FA Cup. And I suppose you've not had too much luck in Manchester recently. Obviously, a defeat at the weekend, another defeat to Man City, quite damaging, you could say. But I suppose you could say you're going to be back to full strength side on Tuesday. And I suppose in the grander scheme of things, Saturday is a far bigger fixture.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think any of us are expecting to go to Old Trafford and get anything. We know the depressing reality of life outside the top 6 is that you expect to lose all 12 of those fixtures, and then you just pick up what you can. And your season is defined by the games that you can win at home against those outside the bottom, say, 10, and certainly trying to beat the ones in the bottom 4 or 5 away from home. So I'm not particularly concerned about Tuesday, albeit I'm kind of fed up of going to Manchester and getting a hiding in the moment. It's really kind of depressing. I work in Manchester as well, so it's really great going into work on a Monday morning, and in fact, my PA is a City fan. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. I really am. But yeah, it's one of those where Dyche doesn't like cups, whether it's League Cup, FA Cup, Europa League. It just doesn't seem to perform very well. I don't know whether or not his tactical ability lends itself very well to cup knockout competitions. I think he maybe prefers the longevity of a league and the long game. Tuesday night, we've hit them at a time where they're playing incredibly well. Confidence in their camp is as high as it can be. If it's not 5-0 again on Tuesday night, I'll be massively surprised. But it doesn't really matter, because home against Southampton is where we need to get our season back on track.
Well, and this weekend it is set to be the annual Freeze Fest in February as Saints visit Burnley. I remember last year our friends, we could barely feel our fingers, and it's going to be 3 degrees again this weekend. But I suppose last year it was, southern soft touches, you could say, but who knows? But last year it was an important point for Saints, and What do you think it's going to be this weekend? What's your prediction?
Really tough. I would have much preferred to be playing you a month ago than I am now. You've obviously found yourselves a little bit of form. You've got that swagger back about you. Let's be realistic here. I never ever expected you guys to be anywhere near the bottom 3 at the end of the season. Pretty similar to last year. I know you guys panicked and you're having a bit of a roller coaster of a ride in the last few seasons, but you might flirt with the bottom 3 and you might struggle to get yourselves away from that in that bottom 3 in the early stages. But you're never going to be anywhere near them. And at the moment, around sort of anywhere in the top 13 is probably your natural position, albeit it might take you a little bit longer than most to get there. Now, at the moment, you're coming to play us with a renewed enthusiasm for your game. Your players are playing with a bit more confidence. You're finding the back of the net and you've had some fantastic results to bounce. So I'm actually expecting you to come to us with a feeling of, right, well, we just need to win this because this is a massive 3 points. You and I are obviously, our teams are very close in the league, so it would be a good opportunity for you guys to put some distance between us. That said, we will also think the same. Taking aside the games against the Manchester sides who are in the top 6, which quite frankly don't really mean anything. We won 3 games back to back against relegation rivals, and we were absolutely robbed of a 4th straight win away at Watford, who are in 7th and absolutely flying. So we should have come away from that actually above you in the league with 4 wins on the bounce. So expect Burnley to be equally as confident and perhaps be able to give you a game. So actually, a draw, this sounds like a real cop-out answer, but a draw wouldn't surprise me, but it equally wouldn't surprise me if either side takes the win.
All right, well, I think it's fair to say we would take a point at Burnley, considering your recent form as well. But if there's any Burnley fans, perhaps, that haven't subscribed to your show, if they're listening along to this video or, downloaded the episode, just let everybody know where we can find you. Really good to speak to you again.
No problem at all. It's always a pleasure. Burnley fans, you can find us at nonaynever.net, which is our website, and our Twitter handles at nonaynever. You can listen through your usual podcast providers and find us on Twitter and on Facebook. Great stuff. Really good to speak to you, and hopefully we'll speak again next season as we both retain our Premier League statuses. So thank you very much then again to Natalie from the No Nay Never podcast. Make sure you head over to their social pages, give them a follow for all of your Burnley needs. But that does wrap up this week's 2nd episode, and perhaps a little longer than usual, but thank you very much for watching along and listening too. And if you're heading to Burnley this weekend, take a spare set of fingers, wrap up warm, and do take care on the roads heading to and from Turf Moor. Can Saints come away with an important victory? Let us know if you're going. Tell us your predictions in the comments below. But only one thing left from me to say is, come on you Saints.